Hello and welcome to the WellCare Podcast by Citius Retreats. My name's George Bownes and I'm a sports and exercise medicine consultant and founder of Citius Retreats.
And I'm Nicola, a strategy advisor in human performance.
So before we get into today's show, here's a few words from our kind sponsor, IBSA. Osteoarthritis is the leading cause of pain and disability in the UK. As our bodies age, there is a loss of naturally occurring hyaluronic acid within our joints, which can lead to reduced shock absorption and lubrication. This can contribute to the development of osteoarthritis, resulting in joint pain, stiffness, and difficulty carrying out daily activities, such as going to work and exercising. Synovial HL is a joint injection with the highest concentration of hyaluronic acid available in the UK, effectively restoring hyaluronic acid in the joint. It is scientifically proven to reduce pain and increase joint function, preserving your joint into the future. Synovial HL is injected in a simple procedure which offers an alternative to medication and surgery. If you'd like to find out more, please visit synovial.co.uk for full product information and a list of clinics offering Synovial HL injections. Synovial. Move freely, live fully. Disclaimer. The procedure must be carried out by an appropriately trained healthcare professional. Welcome to the launch episode of the WellCare Podcast. Nicola, how do you feel about it?
I'm excited, George. How do you feel?
I am very excited. This has been quite a journey to get here, but a very, very fun one. And for someone that I hadn't met that long ago, I think we've got on really well, which is always a good start. We've learned a lot, and we've got this incredible list of people that we're going to be speaking to over the course of the season ahead. And this is a great chance, I think, just today to sit down and kind of give a bit of background about what the podcast is, why we're doing it, who's going to be interested in it, and where we go from there. So the starting question for every episode, and you regular listeners to podcasts may have heard this kind of concept elsewhere, but I think it works well in this concept, is for you as a guest, what does wellness mean?
Wellness, I think, for me, has been a journey, but a really exciting one from the point of view of you find out about yourself, you find out about what floats your boat, what doesn't, what works for you as an individual. And it's informed by so many different aspects of both personal and professional life. What, for me, at this stage of my life, kind of coming out of the clinical side of my career and into more the commercial, the organizational, the strategy, it's really about understanding holistically what allows you to perform well, what works well for you personally, professionally, and how do you holistically look after yourself so that you're in it for the long run.
Life in the long run.
Exactly. George, what does wellness mean to you?
I think it means a variety of things. And as you say, it means different things to different people. And I think it's how you then get people engaged in it. I think it's quite a broad term, and I think you can take it in lots of different little ways. But if you go back to the kind of classical medical education piece, we talk about the biopsychosocial model of care. And so thinking about people in a holistic way, not just are you physically fit, what's your VO2 max look like? Are you emotionally resilient? So, is anxiety a big issue for you, for example? And then how those things then blend together, really, and how people support each other. We often see people in clinic a lot who they've got an injury of some description and they can't use physical activity in the way that they had been doing to help balance their life. And they're then a bit lost and they're a bit broken. And that's how you can then really help people to go on a journey around the values of things like breath work, the values of lower, more mindfulness type work like yoga, Pilates and bar, or things like hot, cold exposure, and then a whole other raft of other things that are out there. And I think that's what's amazing about the wellness piece and well-being piece is that it can mean different things to different people, and people can engage in it in different ways. And I think we've got an incredible lineup of people coming on this show, not just in season 1. I like to think there's a season 2 in us. And I think it's great to meet so many passionate people who are trying to really empower people to live that healthier, happier life.
And I think for me, when we started this conversation, I was like, and actually someone that we've talked to about being a guest, they were like, why are you doing this? Why are you having these conversations? And I think I always used to shy away from the term wellness, coming from a very, very evidence-based kind of clinical background, because it is unregulated, it is wide, it means something different to every person. But I also think that's a reason for clinicians and practitioners to lean into it rather than away from it. I've now decided, from the point of view of we can bring clinical practice and evidence base and a more clinical approach to wellness because we come from a clinical background. And I think that's good rather than it being an area not to touch, because our patients or people that we may see clinically or that may interact with our services, they are using a wide range of ways to manage their well-being or to look after themselves. And so we need to, I think, be aware of that. It's really interesting, I think, the guests that we've got coming on this first series, we've taken quite, I suppose, a clinical practitioner. And it'd be interesting to see where conversations kind of go in the future, whether you go more the entrepreneur or the kind of business side as well. But they come with such expertise that they are not kind of gurus in their space, but more like really interesting, like having Sophie Bostock come from a medical background, then expert into sleep. So there's that real validity and weight that comes into those conversations, I feel.
100%. As always, a number of points raised that need unpacking in response when it comes to having a conversation with you. But no, it's all great, isn't it? Because you've got lots of these practitioners, and you use Sophie as an example. I could use Richie Norton as an example, where you might be working one-on-one with a client in your normal everyday practice. But when you then start layering these people together and doing it for wider audiences, which is what we're trying to open this out to, it's just sort of where, like you say, the leaning in piece, like what can you do to optimize your sleep? You know, what does an ice bath potentially give you? You know, what is good information out there, and what's actually, you know, as you say, unregulated information out there? Because there's different. I use an ice bath as an example. You can use it as a recovery piece if you're training a lot, or you can use it as that resilience piece around building up resilience, and the mindfulness piece that goes with it and the breath work that goes with it. So people often will just fire it out there like an umbrella term, but actually people are using it in different ways, and it's kind of having an appreciation of that. Yeah. You know, some of the science pushing back and saying, actually, if you're in a muscular build phase, you don't want to be doing ice baths because it deregulates what you're actually trying to upregulate by trying to get that hypertrophy response, etc., etc. That's diving into a bit of detail straight away, but that's the point: is that, you know, where is the science on this stuff, and where does it fit in the wider scope? And that's why I think where we've curated a group of incredible practitioners who are leaders in their field, who are really trying to push forward in what that looks like, and then how that all layers in together, I think is really, really, you know, empowering for not just practitioners, but for people who want to engage in these practices and really improve that health and well-being on the journey that they're on.
And I think also it's okay to say it's an evolving dynamic piece as well, because there is new innovation, new technology happening in this space, as across kind of healthcare, medical, wellness, fitness, really. And as these practices become more mainstream and different modalities or ways to manage our kind of performance, it means our learnings will evolve as well. Like, the research hasn't really caught up. The research lags behind. So we have this ability to engage with people that are using practices with at like the coalface with people day to day. They've got a huge amount of learning. It might not be an RCT or randomized controlled trial to the point that it's going to create clinical guidelines, but that doesn't mean it hasn't got an effectiveness in people's lives.
Yeah, I mean, sports medicine is, which is my background, so working with high performance sport athletes across the UK landscape, as well as military rehab, you know, they always talk about N=1. Does it work for that person? If it does, great, go with it. And that's where I think, you know, we accept that not everything works for everybody. And actually, it's when you use something or when you don't use something. Use that ice bath as an example, as a piece. But people having greater understanding of their bodies, both physically, mentally, emotionally, and then where you need to engage with something and then not. You might need it for a short period of time, like a pair of crutches that you just use, gets you over the bump where you're at, and then you progress on from it. But you've learned from going down that journey. Otherwise, you can just bimble around trying things that actually might have been really good for you, but you just didn't engage with it properly because you didn't have the right level of a practitioner kind of delivering you the information. You weren't engaging with it because you didn't know, which I think is a lot of the space in that wellness piece around people not knowing. And then if healthcare practitioners don't know, they might feel a bit embarrassed about not knowing about the value of doing breath work because they maybe haven't done it themselves, potentially, for example.
So I've got two kind of questions I want to talk to you about.
You always have more than two. I can't believe it's only two.
Well, two for now. If you think about the practices, like elite practices that happen in sport, sorry, I should say practices that happen in elite sport and in high performance environments. And a lot of, I think, like a lot that's happening in wellness is trying to replicate some of those scenarios or some of that ability. And we can, I think now, because of innovation happening or it just becoming more of a consumer market, we can just buy things that you didn't be able to kind of access before. What becomes the turning point in, or where do those markets then, are there clear distinct barriers or does it all just merge into, what do you see the future?
Well, there's an episode coming up, isn't there, where we're going to speak to somebody who works in PR, who's very much in the health and wellbeing space across the market, and they're going to give us some great insight. Katie Marshall, looking forward to that. I think what's really interesting, we're recording this in the autumn, where we're launching this in September. We've just had the Summer Olympics. There's some really key examples there with some of the athletes going on. I think it's quite interesting how previous Olympics were all about what medal did we get? Where do we sit in the medals table? How many golds did we get? How many silver? How many bronze? Etc. The stories coming out of the Olympics were much more around people's journey. I use someone like Adam Peaty as a really good example. Okay, he didn't go back and win his gold, but he'd been out of the pool so much that for him actually just to get back in the pool and start competing again was a huge thing where he needed all the support around him to get there. Someone else who was prominent in the wellness conversation was Adam Burgess in canoe. And so he's a practicing breathwork master. And so he's learned a lot from doing that and the types of breathwork that are available. Most people just think it's lying on a mat and taking a deep breath. There's a hugely more to it than that. We've just had, the football competition over the summer where England football have taken a breath worker with them, and the impact that that's having. So actually, it's almost like some of these wellness offerings are out there and they're only just being accepted in the high performance sports space. Whereas actually, commercially, if you like, for the desk-based athlete that you'd see in clinic every day, they've got far better access almost, or legitimate access almost, than they have necessarily in those high performance spaces. So that's quite interesting because normally you do see where I use something like MyoMaster, for example, so recovery aids, whether that's lymphatic drainage, massage guns, etc. They started in that high performance space and then they've come out into that mass market. And that's the same as what you're seeing with Hytro in terms of occlusion training and where that safety is. So you've now got inclusion devices built into clothing, which is very often used in high performance sport, all the time, particularly around knee joints. And we're going to talk later in the series about ACL rehab from a physiotherapy point of view, and that's a key part of where we're at in terms of the retreats and bringing these innovations that you see in high performance sport down to the desk-based athlete to give them that wraparound feel that gives you that high performance environment. But actually it's quite interesting how wellness is almost coming up the other way in some ways. And I use breathwork because it's just a really easy example. Like I say, the football and the Olympic athletes, they're now getting into it and using it. And when you look at that pool-based breath work that you can do, the big breath holds, the big work you can do underwater, so you're in very, very low-level loading conditions, and you can really get a big dopamine hit, a big cardiovascular gain, but you could be very compromised. Again, I use the knee as an example, ACL or osteoarthritis, where you maybe can't do that on land, but you can then do that in water. Now, that hasn't quite translated over into what they're doing in high performance sport, in the mainstream of high performance sport. There might be a few individual practitioners out there, use Adam as an example. But for actually the everyday desk-based athlete who's going to come on the retreats and have this exposure, that's actually available to you.
Yeah.
So actually, that comes to that point where what we're offering in the retreats is super, super experienced practitioners, not just physios or sleep experts or nutritionists, but also these underpinning wellness experts to give this experience, which is, I would say, better than what you're going to get in a high performance environment. I'm obviously going to say that because I've organised it, but I just genuinely think, and when you look at the retreat and the feedback that we've had from the first ones that we've done, that's where everyone's like, oh wow, this is amazing. We're not just individual practitioners operating, we're collectively coming together to really deliver a great environment that we're enjoying working in.
So there's a real degree of personalisation there, as I take from that, from the point of view of the merging of medicine, health, wellness as well. What we also know, and it does get pulled up quite a lot, I think, especially when there's big events like the Olympics, that just because you work in an elite environment doesn't actually mean that always you are practicing evidence-based treatment as well. So it kind of goes, I think it creates an ability to kind of critique practices as well. But that personalization of like just coming away from prescriptive protocols and that actually trialing some different things that work for you or don't work for you is quite an important aspect to it. If there was one thing that you would want listeners to get out of these conversations or this series on the WellCare podcast, do you have a thought what that is at this stage?
I think you've pretty much said that there, in the sense of give yourself permission to go and try these things. I talked a bit before at the beginning there about how a patient would come into clinic, right, I've ruptured my ACL. I can't do the physical activity I was doing to balance my life. Now I'm in a bit of a panic mode around what I can go and do. Whereas actually the reality is you could have gone and done it that week before you did rupture that ACL, or you did get that other type of injury that you may have sustained. We see a lot of people who, I've always thought about trying to do that, but I've never sort of made the time to go and do it. And that's reproduced across people's lives in lots of different areas, not just in health and well-being. But making that little bit of time to go and try a breathwork session or try a yoga because I've never done it, or Pilates because I've got a bit of a sore back and it's affecting me because I'm working my desk really, really hard, and my head's getting full of stress of life, etc., etc. I think it's that whole giving people permission to go and have a look at these things and try these things and try out a few different practitioners as well, because you can't just go and do one Pilates class once and think, oh, that was rubbish, it's not for me. It's like, it might just be you didn't get on with that practitioner, or it was Matt and you want to go and try reformer. Those types of things, and just leads you on and guides you through it, I think. And I think it's opening people up to the concept that there's this whole other world out there, if you like, that's readily available, that's mainstream, as I was trying to say, really, that people can go and access. And you can access it anywhere in the world because everything's online now. Yeah.
No, I think there's some good points there from the point of view, of when something happens, it's not a moment to stop completely. It's a moment to adapt or to modify or to take a different path. But we quite often talk about this in physio as well, from the point of view of just because you can't do one thing doesn't mean you can't do anything. So, but that is sometimes the myth, or maybe the kind of old, like, if you've got back pain, don't do anything. Or it's like, well, no, just modify what you're doing, but carry on with activity as well. So keeping those pillars of health, keeping those pillars of well-being, but modifying them for wherever your starting point is, but also whatever life and major events happen throughout your life as well. Means, and the bit that I always love, and the bit that I suppose I always try to encourage during my clinical career was this empowerment of me not doing things for you, but giving you either the education or the knowledge or coaching you behavioral change wise that allowed you to go explore that for your own body. So that empowerment kind of aspect, rather than as a practitioner, I'm doing something for you. And that was a real switch, I think, in my practice.
Everyone's a coach, right? Everyone's a coach.
Yeah, but they don't know that.
But they don't know that. Or they haven't done that they haven't done enough patient numbers to have seen that, or to go through it, or things have gone well and things have gone badly, what worked well, what didn't work well, how you engage with that particular personality type. You know, you talked about...
And to have those quite transparent conversations with people that I don't know how you'll respond to it because I've not met you before, but these are the options that could happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I think we still live in a quick fix. How do we, like, what's the pill I can take kind of scenario?
Yeah, and it's layers, isn't it? It's how these things operate, you know, and that's why I always say to, you know, start with such a background of questions when it comes to patients walking in the door, like, you know, how old are you? Where do you live? What do you do for a job? Because you're getting into that mode of, right, this person who's this personality type, who's got this background, who's got these interests, who's come with this injury, right, you're probably more open to this, but actually the best practitioner in your area to get you engaged with this particular thing, whether that's yoga, Pilates, S&C, you know. I went to Barry's this morning, did a boot camp, but, you know, it's like there's big variety of the practitioner you could get. So you go to, I'll use Barry's as an example, you go to Barry's, you get very different experience between one practitioner and another. And if you're the personality type that doesn't get on with that one particular, you know, you're going to think, oh, that's a rubbish concept of physical fitness or an activity. You're like, well, actually, no, you probably just didn't get on with that particular practitioner. Actually, why don't you go and try this other one?
Yeah.
And you might find it's more enjoyable for you.
I don't think we can not have the conversation around equality, because there is always the argument when it comes to kind of, I suppose, wellness and what we're trying to talk around thriving, not surviving. Unfortunately, like, the utopia would be that everything was available free of charge and everyone had equal kind of access. But that's not a problem I can solve. That's not a problem you can kind of solve as well. So what becomes the absolute simplistic or even kind of free resources or versions or messages that we could leave listeners with? Great question.
So just to go back one step, in terms of the journey of how we've got here to doing this podcast, because I think it's important at this stage. So Rose Harvey and Steph McCall, who do the 5 Miles Easy podcast, recorded in the same studio that we're in here today.
Okay.
Invited me here in September. And I'd started to work in the wellness world beginning of last year with a few different concepts. And that's where I'd sort of linked in to meet Rose and Steph, and then they invited me on. And it was one of their early episodes of what is a great podcast series if you haven't heard it. And it's talking to people about running and what it means to them. And I spoke in my episode really around physical activity and what the landscape of most adults look like. So you've got the high-performing athletes right at the top end who are full-time doing it all the time. And then you've got the people who are extremely physically inactive at the bottom. And everyone's trying to hit that kind of 150 minutes of physical activity a week, which can come in many different forms. So it could just be, you know, you go for a walk, or you go for, you know, swimming, or something that you enjoy. But my point is that you've got to be physically active, and active travel comes into it. I've cycled my bike to get here, which is why I'm wearing shorts and a t-shirt. You've driven.
Yeah, you've dressed up for the occasion.
It's also sunny outside today for change. But anyway, so we've all, you know, come on a different journey to get there. But that physical inactivity piece of the adult population, so 18 to 65, you've got 30% of the adult population not doing more than 30 minutes in a month.
Okay.
Which, when I told Rose and Steph that, they were like, what? And I was like, so if that's your starting position, just going outside for a 20-minute walk is a great start. It costs you nothing.
Yeah.
It's put some shoes on, go outside the house and just start moving. and then see where that movement gets you. We talk in clinic about giving people permission to go and try things. And we've talked about that a little bit in this episode around try these various things. But, it doesn't cost anything to go for a walk outside. There's no effort in terms of knowledge that you need to have. There's no fancy bit of kit. You just need to start and then see what it gives you, see where it takes you, literally. And then you can build on that. And you can go down various different angles. But I always try to speak to people about, that's when you got to understand what their interests are. Because there's no point saying to someone, go and do this if they're not interested in it. They're just not going to do it. And they're going to think you're an idiot, and then they're never going to come back. So you've got to find something that people are going to engage in. And you've got to think about those low-hanging, really obvious fruits that are easy on the plate. People can't put a boundary up around why they can't do it. And then you're building a relationship, and then you go from there. So if you get a chance to follow them up, they go, hey, I did that thing you said. And actually, it did make a difference. I did feel a bit better, a bit more positive about life. Put my phone away for 20 minutes and escape the stress of what life was giving me from that device. And then you go from there, and then you can build a longer term relationship with people around their association with activity and the benefits it's going to give you.
So understanding their starting point, I think, is so that kind of initial discovery analysis, but that has to be a self-care conversation as well, doesn't it? Like, you have to be curious to know why you're not exercising or what's going on, or kind of like there's so much around, I think, like being curious and knowing, is there something more, what are the boundaries, because our bodies are capable of so much more than we ever really put them through, unless you are doing extreme, unless you're Spencer Matthews and you've just run 30 marathons in 30 days across the desert kind of thing. Like, yeah,
but he'll come back with as you use him as an example, he'll come back with something else, right? Because people, when you start challenging yourself, you're like, oh, what if and then you go to the next thing.
Yeah.
But start off simply with what's going to get people engaged with doing something.
Yeah.
Because something's better than nothing. And you move your health a long way from physical inactivity to actually doing something.
Yeah.
It's hugely beneficial across all of your health, whether that's mental health, physical health, and reducing those long-term chronic disease pieces.
Yeah. And I think just really, really leaning into, in this kind of quick fix culture and things, leaning into that things just take time. You've got to be in it for the long run. You've got to be able to enjoy the process. Like, I bet you there was midway through that Barry's boot camp this morning that you weren't enjoying it. But yeah, it has to be a mind shift that actually, even when it's tough, we have to enjoy it, or we have to not give up anyway. That resilience piece.
Yeah, I mean that can also mean different things to different people. I think there's quite a lot of messaging at the moment which I've seen, which I think is really good, which is you've just turned up for yourself and you're going to go and give your best effort.
Yeah, at that point.
But your best effort today might only be 5 out of 10.
Yeah. And that's fine.
But you've turned up for yourself, and that's good.
Yeah.
It's all about being there to doing it, whatever that is.
Yeah.
To then go from there.
Yeah. Good. Are you excited about the conversations coming up?
I think the conversations coming up are incredible. I think.
How much information do you want to give?
About the future ones?
Yeah, about the episodes recorded and the ones planned.
So I'm very excited about what will be our first episode. We'll call this the launch, or episode 2, which will be a live, which is with Richie Norton, who's someone that I've worked with over the last 12 months or so. He's got a huge range of experience across well-being and wellness, and he's a former athlete himself, so he understands it in a very different way, but does a lot of crossover work now with corporates. So he's really dealing with people who are going to seriously benefit from the messages that are being given out. And I think the reason I like this next one is because we're not just going to sit there and talk. We've got a few people in the audience who are going to ask some questions, and then we're going to go and do a practical, which, in terms of do some breath work, do some hot cold exposure, do some cryo. I think that's great. And I think it's good to sit here and talk about these things, but it's even better to go and do these things.
And experience it.
Yeah, exactly. And then get the real feedback from people about, some of the people in the audience who are coming probably won't have done the things that we're going to do afterwards, which is great. And some people will be maybe more experienced and further down the journey of it.
Yeah.
Which again is also great.
And other conversations?
Yeah, I think how we've got psychology involved So with Tess Brown, how we've got high-end physiotherapy with Steve Miller from the EIS, or UK Sport Institute as it is now. And we've got some other future ones down the line with Anna Poyser from the LTA. So we're getting really different variety of practitioners, but all fantastic experts in their area. And everyone's excited to talk to us as well, which is actually quite good, which is always enjoyable, I think, from that point of view. And I think, I think hopefully by the time we get to the end and we look back across the whole series, we've really taken people on a journey and showed them, signposting them to various things that they might want to engage with. Maybe not now, maybe in the future, but they might have a friend who needs to kind of hear that message at the moment. And I think that really helps to kind of build a community of kind of where we're hopefully going with this, to really bring these things alive, so people know what the options are.
Perfect. I'm excited to have the conversations.
Great.
If they want to know more information, where would they go? Where would they be signposted?
So a variety of pages. I think, we're going to be pushing it out on our social media channels, which is great. We've got our own website as well, the citiusretreats.com website, where we're going to be launching our future retreats. That we've got some very exciting organisations that we're going to be working with around bringing these messages alive and showcasing what's possible, really.
Looking forward to it.
It's going to be great.
Brilliant. Well, that is, I'm excited to be involved in the WellCare podcast.
Well, we're pleased to have you here, Nicola. Thanks so much for being, to be fair to you, actually, the driving force behind it. You're the one who's done all the work.
I do love a podcast chat. I've kind of got a bit of having had some great experience with the first series I was involved in. It's great to be involved in this series and to be having, just to open those conversations. I'm a very curious cat. And so being able to kind of meet new people who are experts in their space and understand their journey, where they've come from, but also the message that they're trying to give in what can be, I think, quite a grey and muddy area sometimes because there's so much choice. But I think that's also something now I've realised you have to embrace, because every person is different and every person will respond differently. So there is a degree of experimentation and trial and error to find what works for you at that phase of your life as well, because that changes as well. So yeah, it's quite a exciting exploration of human performance and human ability.
I mean, you are all the good with the words, aren't you? That's a nice way to end it. So thanks, and please tune in and enjoy the rest of the series that is to come. That's the end of this week's episode. Thanks again to our kind sponsors, IBSA. Osteoarthritis is the leading cause of pain and disability in the UK. As our bodies age, there is a loss of naturally occurring hyaluronic acid within our joints, which can lead to reduced shock absorption and lubrication. This can contribute to the development of osteoarthritis, resulting in joint pain, stiffness, and difficulty carrying out daily activities, such as going to work and exercising. Synovial HL is a joint injection with the highest concentration of hyaluronic acid available in the UK, effectively restoring hyaluronic acid in the joint. It is scientifically proven to reduce pain and increase joint function, preserving your joint into the future. Synovial HL is injected in a simple procedure which offers an alternative to medication and surgery. If you'd like to find out more, please visit synovial.co.uk for full product information and a list of clinics offering synovial HL injections. Synovial. Move freely, live fully. Disclaimer. The procedure must be carried out by an appropriately trained healthcare professional.